Are there any bill introductions this morning? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and I'm going to open the hearing on House Bill 2402, which is creating the Blue Ribbon Commission on Higher Education to study and set long-term goals for higher education in the state of Kansas and requiring the submission of reports to the legislature. And so for a bill brief, I would invite that Chris Wagner, Assistant Revisor, Office of the Revisor of Statutes, to give us a briefing on House Bill 2402. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. House Bill 2402 creates the Blue Ribbon Commission on Higher Education. The bill establishes the commission with 17 members. I won't go through them all right now, but I'll just highlight that there are 6 legislative members on the commission, 3 from the House appointed by the Speaker, Majority Leader, and Minority Leader, and 3 from the Senate appointed by the President, Majority Leader, and Minority Leader. Original terms for members shall expire on January 1 of 2027, and any vacancies shall be filled in the same manner as the original appointment. Chairperson of the commission is jointly appointed by the President and Speaker. Meetings may occur at any time or place upon call of the chairperson, with 9 members constituting a quorum. Members attending meetings will be compensated by the State Board of Regents for expenses and mileage, and staff of the State Board of Regents, Revisor's Office, Legislative Research, and LAS shall assist the commission as requested. The main goals and what the commission is tasked with is studying, discussing, and making recommendations for the following: long-term goals and priorities for higher education, governing structures, financing, costs, savings, and consolidation of the State Board of Regents schools and community and technical colleges, accessibility and affordability of higher education, strengths and weaknesses of higher education and post-secondary educational institutions, strategies for enrollment and degree completion, and strategies for right-sizing and streamlining higher education with a student focus. Commissions are required to provide a preliminary report to the legislature on or before January 12th, 2026, with a final report on the commission's findings and recommendations due on or before January 27th of 2027. The provisions of the bill become effective July 1, 2025, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Chris. Committee, are there any questions for the Revisor's Office? All right, seeing none, thank you for Representative Helgerson.
I don't see any requirements or any comments about faculty. Is there any faculty representation on this?
There could be. There's appointments that could be made by the chairperson of the State Board of Regents.
But
There's one member to, no, not necessarily a requirement for faculty.
What happened to your wrist?
I sprained it doing yard work, which is, you know.
Didn't do it doing amendments for me.
No,
Okay.
no, not yet anyways.
Thank you.
That's what the brace is for.
Any further questions regarding the bill? All right, seeing none, thank you, Chris, for giving us a briefing on House Bill 2402. We'll go ahead and open up for testimony, and the first individual that I have that's going to be appearing before us in person is the representative from the 110th District, and that'll be Representative Ken Rogers. Representative?
Good morning, colleagues. All right, so here we go. We are here. I guess this is me as a recovering chairman of higher education budget that decided to do this. House Bill 2402 is something that we have kind of talked about for a number of years. We all in this body especially, or in this committee, have talked a lot about higher ed, the challenges, the opportunities, the angst, many discussions on funding, many discussions on what is being taught and so on. So what this bill does is, I believe, finally puts the legislature back in charge of where we're heading with higher education to work with our other partners. You'll find in this bill what this is simply a structure bill with what this is to set it up, utilizing leadership and going in really with, I see it as a blank slate of putting everything on the table from our kind of sense the big three our research institutions, to our regionals, to our community colleges, to our technical schools, and our other ones, as you'll see listed here in this bill. I use the word right-sized, and then I take that back because I don't necessarily think that should be the main focus. I think everything should be the focus. And we've had a lot of folks that have said, how come this group or that group, faculty and others? But I believe this will be led really by, as the legislature, kind of working, because we are the appropriators. We are the ones that determine the state's portion that goes into that. And we know where we are with population. We know where we are with graduations in our high schools, and to get students to come. I also think what you're going to find, even though it's not directly related, but I know in conversations, the landscape of college has changed. Name, image, likeness, other things, big dollars. Where do we want to be as a state? Where do we want to be with those that are members of the Big 12? Where do we want to be with our community colleges? We look at athletics, but most importantly, I think we look at academics and how are we growing those folks to get those certificates or degrees that they become good taxpayers for the state of Kansas. So this is not an easy process. This is not have one meeting and come up with something that we put in a 3-ring binder and put up on the shelf and say, well, there's the Blue Ribbon Task Force, and that's what it is. I hope that this, much like hopefully our Water Task Force will be completed, that this will be one that will be a working document. So with that, I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you, Representative Rogers. Questions, Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just, more of a comment than a question. I just want to thank you for your leadership on this. You know, I'm a graduate of both the community college and one of the big 3. And I think sometimes they have different strengths and different goals. And thanks for stepping out there and doing this.
Any further questions for Representative Rogers? All right, seeing none, thank you for being here. The next individual that I have, well, actually, you're a member of the committee, so I'm glad you're here. The next individual that I have as proponent testimony would be Heather Morgan, the Executive Director for the Kansas Association of Community Colleges. Ms. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Kansas Community Colleges are excited to support this bill, and as Representative Rogers said, we are really thankful for the thoughtful work that's already gone into this. A number of House members had talked to us over the course of drafting this bill. There are some complicated things that need to be addressed in higher education. We think that the right mix of people, both legislative and non-legislative members, are on the committee. Everyone in this room on the committee I've had conversations with about one or 2 aspects or 3 aspects of what we need to do for higher education in the future. I think community colleges are excited to be a part of the task force with you all, looking at what needs to change, what is good that we need to be amplifying. And we're really thankful for the thoughtful opportunity to do that and to bring back some recommendations that are going to address some of the concerns I know people on this committee have. With that, again, just thank you for your thoughtfulness of putting this together, this bill, working with us, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Morgan. Is there any questions for Ms. Morgan? All right, seeing none, thank you again for being here. That is the only individuals that I have in person for proponent testimony. Is there anybody else that wishes to address the committee as a proponent? All right, we'll move on to neutral testimony because I'm not showing any opponents. And for neutral testimony, it'll be Dr. Blake Flanders, the President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents. Dr. Flanders.
Thank you, Chair Waymaster, members of the committee. I'm here to provide a neutral testimony, but certainly will support this committee and provide all the data and the support you need in terms of meeting space or wherever you need to do that as well. I looked at the charge, and those are weighty issues, and they need to be addressed. Now, I don't have disagreement with the previous testimony, but I would tell you that the legislature has always had a tremendous influence over the direction of higher education. And I'll just tell you, 20 years ago, the Board of Regents actually recommended We had technical schools that were affiliated with K-12 boards at that time. Some were converting to technical colleges. And the board actually voted to make a recommendation to merge the technical colleges and schools with a community college or a university. Okay? That probably at that time, the lesson I've learned, this happened in 2006, was that we were ahead of this body. And not ahead in terms of maybe a good or bad way, but there should have been probably more communication as we went, because a commission sprung up immediately and that was stopped. Now fast forward, we now have, I believe, 5 of those original colleges, one merged with Highland Community College, and then several have affiliated. We have Wichita Area Technical School affiliated with WSU Tech. We've had 2 affiliations, North Central Kansas Technical College and Northwest Technical College with Fort Hays, and then right here in Topeka, Washburn Tech actually affiliated with Washburn University. It's too early to tell with the Fort Hays Northwest and Fort Hays North Central. That just happened. But the others have been wildly successful. Okay, I think if you'd look back at the enrollment numbers and completion numbers. But I do want you to know that there's some really good things happening in our system. Our community college success rate is one of the higher in the nation, and you'll be able to see that when you come in. We've raised graduation rates, on-time graduation rates at universities, 9.7% over the last 5 years. Part of that is your partnership, because you've increased need-based aid, and we've been able to really help students as they move through their educational experience. So we look forward to supporting you and driving any long-term improvements that you'd like to do with higher education. That concludes my testimony.
All right, thank you for being here, Dr. Flanders. Any questions for Dr. Flanders? All right, seeing none, thank you again. Again, I'm not showing anybody that wishes to appear in person for neutral testimony, so if there is anybody, right now would be your opportunity. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 2402. All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and work on Senate Bill 125, which is authorizing the payment of certain claims against the state. And as I've indicated before in previous meetings, this is also going to be our trailer bill, or as I mentioned yesterday, referenced and coined by Representative Getz as the minibus. And as I mentioned, we want to keep this fairly light. Just a few items that was not addressed, or maybe they might have been hearings that we had after we had passed House Bill 2007 out of this committee. So I would entertain a motion to enter discussion on Senate Bill 125. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move the adoption of Senate Bill 125.
All right, we have a motion second by Representative Wassinger. Discussion on Senate Bill 125. We do have some GBAs, but I do know that one representative does need to step out at 9:30, so I'm going to turn it over to him first, and then dial in to go over the GBAs that we got from the governor's office. And so I turn it over to Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the time. So I think it was last week we had a discussion on workforce development from a company. We had a presentation from a company that is a top-notch talent recruiter for out-of-state talent to relocate to rural areas in Kansas. And it's workforce development, especially in rural areas, is something that we talk about quite a bit in commerce. And that presentation kind of caught me as something that we would like to at least try. And so I have a proviso that would set up the Community Talent Acquisition Grant Proviso, or grant fund, in the Treasurer's Office. And originally, we were thinking $3 million over 2 years, but this proviso is to start at $1.5 million in 2025, and then we'll address the other half next year for the next budget. I'm sorry, 2026. My bad. Right, 2026.
All right, you heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Francis. First question is funding source.
EDIF, if it's available. If not, then SGF.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Tarwater, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you hear the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Representative Tarwater.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Legislative Post Audit recently had a review, or an audit review of adult virtual school funding. And we had a deep dive on one particular third party that a school district, Central Plains School District, hired to do their adult education. And when the transcripts were sent into the Department of Education, they had some hours from the previous year on it, and so they were completely discarded. And the company was not given credit for the hours of education or the funding for education for any of the transcripts. So rather than just take out the few items that were from the previous year, they discarded the entire transcript. And they didn't do that with any of the other school districts, and it was obviously clear that they were targeting this company because it was a third party. And I do have a proviso to hand out. We have a few members in here that were on the Legislative Post Audit Committee, and I would imagine that they'll all certainly agree. But this proviso here moves money from the Department of Education to the, let's see, central, yeah, where is it? Central Plains Unified School District, number 1112, for the 500 adult virtual credits that they were not paid for. And so the school district is out $354,500, and that was done by our auditors, and it's a pretty solid number.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Francis. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, Representative Tarwater, you may close. Oh, Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Central Plains, is that the Claflin, Wilson, is that, or what?
Holyrood.
Holyrood, that whole, okay. Just want to make, I thought so, I want to make sure. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? All right, now seeing none. Representative Tarwater, you may close.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Representative Tarwater, is that complete your provisos?
That's all I have. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you, Representative Tarwater. Okay, now we'll go ahead and move into the GBAs that we had received from the governor's office. I had been in contact with her office about having the GBAs merged into this bill, and they have given us those to us. And so I'd have Dylan Jennifer Light is going to be giving us an update on the GBAs that have been submitted by the governor. As in the past, and for those of you that have not served on the Appropriations Committee before, we'll go through the GBAs. If there is no objection to the GBA, then it is going to be placed into Senate Bill 125. If there is objection, we'll have debate and vote, and then depending on what the vote is, whether or not that will be included or omitted from Senate Bill 125. Again, if there is no objection, it will be inserted into Senate Bill 105. So Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Light, KLRD. I'm going to cover the first of the two, and then Nicole is going to come up and talk about the one for Department of Corrections. So on the back side of the page that you're being handed out, it has two parts to the governor's budget amendment. The first one deals with the State Historical Society, and it is an addition of a Kansas Historical Site Fund. So in 22, the Senate substitute for House Bill 2239, there was a part of that bill which allows the Department of Revenue to distribute donations that Kansas taxpayers can choose to make for a historic site. What this amendment does is it creates that fund within the State Historical Society. The Department of Revenue would then be able to transfer the money regarding that from the Department of Revenue to the State Historical Society, and they'd be able to get the funds to the appropriate historic sites. And that is all that this is doing. It's creating an appropriation for the fund to be made, and then the money would be able to be moved from the Department of Revenue to the State Historical Society so they could use the money to be used for those specific state historic sites. So there's no new expenditures, no new revenue. It's just making sure that the money is able to be used by the State Historical Society. I'd be happy to stand for questions on that, or let Nicole go ahead and get up and talk about the second part of the GBA.
So real quick, just to clarify, this is just establishing the fund when we authorize donations to be made to the Historical Society, but right now there is no fund available to have those funds deposited into.
That is correct.
All right. Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just clarification, if myself as an individual wanted to give to a specific site, then that money would be guaranteed to eventually end up at that site, correct?
Mr. Chair, that is my understanding of how the bill from 22 was designated, so yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions for Jennifer? Any objection to GBA item number 1? All right, seeing none, it'll be included into Senate Bill 125. Now on to GBA item number 2. Nicole, please give us a briefing on the Lansing Correctional Facility Recruitment and Retention, GBA item number 2.
Yep. Good morning, Nicole Renscher, fiscal analyst with KLRD. Item number 2 deals with the Lansing Correctional Facility. It would be an addition of $4.1 million from the State General Fund in fiscal year 26 for a retention pay differential to increase the pay for entry-level correctional officers. This comes from the notification that Core Civic, the owner of a private prison in Leavenworth County, has filed for a special use permit to operate the facility as a detention center for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and this would be to have competitive entry-level rates. The addition would be appropriated to the State Finance Council. The State Finance Council would release the funding to Lansing Correctional Facility upon certification by the Secretary of Corrections that the private prison is becoming operational and the funding is necessary to provide a retention differential. I will stand for questions.
All right, committee, are there any questions for Nicole? Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know how much the pay differential is going to be now between, say, like Lansing and not Ellsworth? Well, our other prisons. I'm trying to think of the other one.
I am not.
Yeah, Hutchison and.
I am not aware of the specific pay differential currently, but I can look into that.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was just curious what the. I mean, we probably need to do this. My only concern is if we raise this quite a bit, we may have people wanting to move up there to that one to get the higher amount. So I was just curious if you can maybe find out. Thanks.
And Nicole, it's the way the GBA is set up, this would go to the State Finance Council, and if that money is not, or let's say the detention center is not established at Lansing, then that money would lapse back to SGF?
That's my understanding, yes.
If the State Finance Council does not act on it?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions for Nicole? Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess that's part of my question is even though they've said Core Civic may open back up again, but if that doesn't happen, then this is all kind of a moot point. But or is it actually going to happen? And is there, I guess, if this happens, how long do we know how long that agreement is with immigration? Because sometimes once you put that differential pay in, it's hard to claw back. I'm just kind of curious because we've had this situation before with all our facilities, as far as in my district, Stockton, Norton, and then everyone else, Larned, the whole situation. That's all of a sudden, I think what the representative said is we could have, if this is their life mission, we could have folks leave our other facilities to come for this. So I don't know if there's anything in that language or not, Mr. Chairman.
Nicole?
I am not aware of how long this would go for. It only states it would be in fiscal year 26. It's possible that it could continue as long as the Core Civic continues to run operate the facility as a detention center.
And my knowledge from the discussions that I've had with the administration is that this is an anticipation. If they do establish a detention center, then we could have, because it's going to be right next to a correctional facility in Lansing, they're worried about just that particular correctional facility where they might be having movement from those correctional officers to the detention center, and the federal government would probably pay higher than we, and so we would have to have a pay differential to keep the correctional officers in Lansing. And it's only for fiscal year 2026 because that is probably the fiscal year that we will see if anything is going to be arising with a detention center in that area. If it doesn't happen, it lapses back. If it does happen, that's probably something that if he continues next year, Chairman Anderson would need to have a discussion about that with corrections.
That's
that-
my understanding, yes.
All right. Representative Bueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is in my district. I attended an open house at Core Civic about 3 weeks ago. So the intention is to reopen. The Core Civic has applied for a special use permit with the city of Leavenworth to do that. For informational purposes, the facility opened in 1992. It was mothballed by executive order of the previous presidential administration in 2021. So the intentions are to open it and do so as expeditiously as possible. And this is precisely the issue. It is cannibalization of the staff that would exist at the Lansing Correctional Facility as opposed to Core Civic. So it's a way to make sure that we don't decimate the staffing at LCF while Core Civic is resuming operations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Representative Bueller, is this a federal, is it a government-owned facility? Private? When I see private, it says in here, private facility is.
Core Civic, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Bueller.
Core Civic is a private company. It's going to be renamed, I think, some Midwest Reception and Reentry Center, Integration Center, something like that. But the primary purpose is to, starting with criminal illegal immigrants, repatriate them or get them through their judicial proceedings and go with that. So, but yes, it's a facility that operated for 30 years and was just closed 3 years ago.
Representative Carpenter.
But just to be clear, it was a private facility. It was not a government-owned building or anything like, okay, thank you.
That's correct.
Any further questions in regards to GBA number 2? Is there any objection to GBA number 2? All right, seeing none, GBA number 2 will also be included into Senate Bill 125. All right, so we got the GBAs taken care of. So the next individual that I have, Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a proviso that I don't know if I should make the motion now or after I discuss it. It's, I know we have it. Someone was going to hand it out, or did you already get it?
I don't think we have it.
I think they're going to hand them out now.
Yeah, we need the one. This is mine. They'll be passing out the correct amendment. Representative Wassinger, if you can describe your amendment.
Okay. The Kansas Lottery was established in 1980 to help all Kansans, not just a select few. It currently contracts with the casinos to allow sports wagering in Kansas, and these contracts come up for renewal in 2027, and contract discussions are already in process. Over the past few years, sports wagering revenue has become more readily available. Can you give me the fresh one? Oh, that's the same one. Readily available, and Kansas is one of the worst states with regards to percentage of dollars that the state brings in. Thus, I have the graph that I handed out. It's not in color, but we are one of the lowest, the states with the lowest amount of money that we're getting from sports wagering. And it's all due to the original contract and the original decision on how they would split things up. The casinos get probably 40%. I have to look and see what I wrote down. They get far more of it, of any of the money, any of the income, and we get 0.5%. 0.5%. That's not helping Kansans. So we would like to be able to stop the negotiations so that we have time to renegotiate the percentage of what we get and how it plays out.
All right, is there a second in adopting the amendment? Representative Williams makes a second, so discussion on the motion. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, just for clarification, it says that no expenditures shall be made by the above agency related to negotiations.
Right now,
But
because
it doesn't prohibit us accepting the negotiations. I was just wanting to make sure that this is tight enough that it didn't, they could curtail it.
Representative Walsinger.
I believe it's tight enough. That's what our purpose is. We're going to just stop this and then make sure that we have a better negotiated contract for, as long as people in Kansas are spending so much money, $2.5 billion, and we get 12,745,000 and change, which is 0.5%. That's not helping Kansans, and that's what the Kansas lottery was about. So we believe this will be strong enough to stop the negotiations so that we can get back in with a more profitable.
Representative Williams.
Okay, thank you. I'm still concerned about the language, and I want to make sure that it doesn't authorize them to continue negotiations, or at least that there should be a clause in negotiations that allows the legislature to amend those. So, Jill, could you let us know? Because it just says expenditure. So I unless that's the standard terminology to stop negotiations from entering into a longer contract.
Representative Francis.
Yeah, and I'm free to be educated on this. I mean, the way I kind of read it is we're stopping the negotiations, but I don't see how we insert ourselves into the negotiations to correct the problem. I mean, I'm all in favor of this thing because I see what you're saying. I just not sure that language accomplishes it.
I would ask the revisers to I know if they know how to fix it, to make sure that we make it stronger and.
Representative Jill. Jill.
Reviser Jill.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this is the standard language of how we draft provisos when we are trying to stop something. Like when we say an agency can't expend monies to do that, it would be like they can't use their salary. So they would be in violation of this if a member of the lottery staff went to enter into negotiations. That would be a violation of this because they are expending money from their fund. And if I may, in regard to the legislature acting, I would think how this would work out is you're stopping them from doing that. So you are giving the legislature FY26, your session of 2026, to act on this in the manner you see fit.
Answer your question?
Yes.
Representative Carpenter. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, Representative Walsinger, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. The next individual I have, Jill has a clarification.
If I could just clarify with the maker of the motion, even though the language says 26, I believe she was intending it to be 25 and 26. Could we clarify that? Yes. Okay, thank you so much.
How that change made. Representative Bueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a written proviso to hand out, but first I'd say a little mea culpa. When we were doing the KDAD's budget, I missed a recommendation from the Kansas Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. The initial request was for $425,000 in 2 FTEs. The request, though, that I'm asking today is for $375,000. There's really 3 elements. The 2 biggest components of that is there's $175,000 for interpreters in the courts and judicial systems. The second $175,000 is for interpreters for interactions between and with the agencies. And then the balance, I think, is another $25,000 is also for interpreters in what you might call a miscellaneous category. So again, this was initially it was on I think the governor's budget recommendation as item number 12, and that never made it to our list. We had 1 through 11. I'm not sure, and 12 dropped off. They did testify in committee, and then when we were working on our recommendations, I just missed this one. So I would beg your indulgence and ask for a proviso for $375,000 to support KDADs for interpreters.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion seconded by Representative Carpenter. Discussion on the motion. There's a question by the revisers. Is this SGF?
It's SGF, and Dylan just reminded me, I screwed up again. It's DCF, not KDADs.
So DCF, SGF, and 26.
Yes, sir.
All right. Jill, you have all your questions. All right. Representative Williams.
Okay, so I'm just curious, is this $375,000 higher than what we paid for interpreters the previous year? If so, why is there that significant of an increase?
It was a miss. It wasn't in there. And as I recall from the hearing, which is now almost 2 months ago, it was a need that we had planned to make a recommendation during our normal budget recommendation.
Representative Williams.
Sure. Okay, so just trying to understand if that's a new appropriation. I mean, I know it is for this year, but it seems like that would be something that we would have funded every year and it would have been inside the budget. So it's just more of a curious why it wasn't inside the budget, or if this is something we're doing above and beyond what we typically have in the budget.
Representative Bueller.
Part of it was above and beyond. That's that incremental, I believe, $50,000 in the 2 FTEs. It was the original request was for 400 and something with 2 FTEs, and then that was scaled back to what this request is.
Representative Williams.
Sure. Sorry, since we don't actually have it in front of us. How many FTEs?
No FTEs.
No FTEs.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the proviso? Seeing none, Representative Bueller, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Any more, Representative Bueller?
No, Mr. Chair, that's it.
All right. Next, I have Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 3 different things I would like to go through. First, I'd like to go over the university bonding projects, and I have an executive summary that reviser staff has prepared to be distributed to the committee.
Continue, Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you may know, when we did the HB 2007, we got to the end of the day, and I brought up the fact that we hadn't done university bonding, and we kind of ran out of time to do it. So the Higher Ed Budget Committee did do an informational hearing where we heard testimony from the universities that have bonding authority requests. And we also, here in Appropriations, just recently heard some of that testimony. So the first one, University of Kansas, it's for their future student housing needs. Their on-campus housing capacity, they're about 98, 99% at capacity. They're really running out of room. And so that's a good problem to have with their 2 large freshman classes. And so they're needing our support for that. Then University of Kansas, they have these bonds that were issued in 2016 where they went to the state of Wisconsin to get those bonds issued. They want to bring that back in-house for the Kansas Finance or Kansas Development Finance Authority to bring those back in-house and have them refinanced to save money. Then Wichita State University for the next phase of their stadium project, $60 million. Then Kansas State University would be, they need additional room to finish their ag Ag Innovation Center. It's a large project. They said they wouldn't use the additional $23.5 million if they didn't need it, but they really just need that cushion to get things going. They're continuing to raise money from private sources for that project. The last one is Kansas State University Vet Med Center for the construction and development of the veterinary diagnostic laboratory. And some of us have toured that facility this fall, but that project is $130 million. And it would be financed by appropriations from the State General Fund and any appropriate special revenue funds. I'll move this as a motion, Mr. Chair.
All right, committee, is there a second? Second by Representative Amix. Discussion on the motion. So the first question that I have, obviously, I believe all of these were discussed yesterday when we had a discussion on the bonding by the universities, all self-sustaining as far as repayment methods, with the exception of the diagnostic laboratory on K-State's campus, which will actually be a State of Kansas building, correct? Just on the campus.
I guess technically, I mean, I view all university properties as belonging to the state of Kansas. So I don't know if that's the same definition you're looking at.
Because that's the discussions that I've had with Kansas State University is that it'd be on the campus, but it's actually owned by the state of Kansas. And that's why that one is paid from the State General Fund as opposed to the others, which are basically self-sustaining. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So coming back to University of Kansas, I noticed that one of the items that they had requested, it was not included in that, was for the School of Architecture. So I was just wondering if there are discussions with the chair, you being the chair of higher ed, or our chair of appropriations with University of Kansas to find out in the future, if this request comes back, what their alumni, professional, and public private funding support is, because I don't think we had that, and I didn't know if they ever shared that total with you.
Representative Howell.
In terms of the architecture project, I don't believe I recalled getting any of that detailed information, but I know it's a 3-phase project. It's rather large. The first phase was $60 million.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would just make a blanket comment, and I think that this would probably be true for many of us here, that when you're going to make a bonding request, especially in 3 phases, that it might be a good idea to share with us what you have done in your community to secure private donations. And we know that some of our universities have successfully done that, and we'd like to see that in others, or at least I guess I should only speak for myself. So perhaps if they bring that back, Mr. Chair, they provide that information.
That has been expressed to the university themselves.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the bonding amendment? Representative Amick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to make sure that the Cancer Center is still in the bill.
Representative Howell.
Yes, thank you, Representative. Yes, it was in HB 2007, the additional bonding authority for the University of Kansas Cancer Center.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Howell, for that clarification. Any further discussion on the amendment? All right, seeing none, Representative Howell, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Representative Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As some of us who have been on appropriations at least for a couple more years remember that in previous session we included some additional money for the Kansas Geological Survey to support them in their efforts as they work on surveying the Ogallala Aquifer, doing a lot of research as it relates to, I guess, those aquifers out west. Other services across the state were trying to bring their expertise back up. They lost staff over the years, but anyways, we had basically allowed them to equip themselves through funding, additional expertise and scientists. They've been successful in filling 9 out of 12 positions. they're in the process of trying to fill 3 additional positions. One is for a water scientist. A person of that profession would have a PhD in hydrology, and they're in the final stages of, I guess, they've invited 3 finalists to campus for an in-person interview, and they hope to hire this spring, but they're not sure it'll be done but before the end of the fiscal year where they're actually onboarded. There's another position, water lab tech. Again, another PhD level experience, and they're continuing to receive applications for that. Another water field technician. They're working with Fort Hays State University to put this field technician in residence at the university there at Fort Hays, and so a good partnership. But they're uncertain they can get all these positions filled before the end of the fiscal year. And as you know, in HB 2007, the House version of that bill, we adopted a proviso that said if you don't have all of these FTEs filled, then they will lapse. And I would hate for them, they're in the middle of trying to get these positions filled. One requires like a global search because of the amount of expertise they're looking for. So I'd hate for them to go through all the legwork, then they miss it by a week or 2 or something like that. So I would like to offer a conceptual motion here, Mr. Chair, to exempt the Kansas Geological Survey from the provision in HB 2007, which would lapse their FTE.
All right, committee, you heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Francis. Discussion on the motion. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do support this, and I think it's clarifying language. But I would just remind everyone that the State Finance Council can review all these. So if there are others that we miss outside of this particular request, we can all be rest assured that the State Finance Council will hear these requests from these agencies and departments and make the appropriate decision based on that. But this is great. Thanks.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Howell, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Representative Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Kansas Board of Regents gave us a list of appropriation language technical adjustment requests. So the first one, and this would be another set of conceptual motions. I apologize for not getting it written out ahead of time. So there's certain federal fund, no limit funds that were lapsed out of the appropriation bill. Some have to do with crime victim assistance, engineering graduate incentive funds. One is a bulletproof vest partnership. It's a federal fund, no limit. So I would like to make a motion that these federal no-limit funds be restored. And would you like me to read those specific sections of the bill out, Mr. Chair?
I don't believe you need to. Okay. Just the no-limit funds that you're wanting to have inserted back in, which you've already done.
Yes. Okay.
Is there a second on the motion? Second by Representative Wassinger. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, Representative Howell, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. I believe you said you had 3, and that's 3, right?
Well, three categories. So this is the third of the third category. I do have another motion I'd like to make.
All right, Representative Howell.
Okay. So there's, I would like to add reappropriation language to the SGF fund appropriations. This would be for Fort Hays State University, K-State University, Emporia State, Pittsburgh State, University of Kansas Medical Center, Wichita State University, Kansas Board of Regents. There's a lot of different things, whether it's the Fort Hays State Professional Workforce Development Regional Stabilization Fund, the Western Kansas Nursing Workforce Development Instruction, the Waterwide Institute at K-State, I mean, there's a whole list. So staff, Brianna, I believe you have this list as well, and maybe the revisor does too. So I'd like to make a motion that the reappropriation language be restored to, as presented in this document by the Kansas Board of Regents. Section 99, Section 101, Section 104, Section 105, Section 106, Section 108, Section 109, Section 111, Section 158, Section 161, Section 163. And also to strike Section 99. And Section 99 is to strike the Fort Hays State University Professional Workforce Development, $750,000. This was already appropriated in 2004 through SB 28.
All right, committee, for the motion, is there a second? Second by Representative Amix. Discussion on the motion. So these are reappropriating all this money back to the Board of Regents?
No, the different sections speak to different universities and the different programs. So, for example, let me see here, University of Kansas, the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center, operating expenditures. Section 108, University of Kansas Medical Center, that would be Kansas, the KU Medical School, Wichita Residency Program. Kansas Board of Regents, it would be the Osteopathic Service Scholarship, the Kansas Blueprint for Literacy, Rural Family Physician Residency Program Expansion Grant. K-State University, Section 158, the Diagnostic Lab. The Pittsburgh State, Section 161, American Center for Reading. So there's a whole host of things. I guess my fear is that, you know, if we don't include this language, you know, universities are going to be like, you know, I know we've got some people that served in the military here, but the Pentagon has that mentality over the years that if they don't spend their dollars before the end of the year, then, you know, they're never going to get that budget back. And I'd rather them be responsible with the money, and if they have to carry it over a little bit in order to be mindful of the dollars that they're entrusted with, then I would rather them have that ability to continue doing that.
So what is the cumulative fiscal impact?
I don't have a total number on that, but, you know, I don't know.
I would just caution moving forward on this. If we don't know what the fiscal impact is, it's probably something that we should not be adopting. Representative Carpenter.
Mr. Chairman, you took the words right out of my mouth. You have no idea what this, the reappropriation amount is?
Representative Howe.
I don't know what the reappropriation amount is to date. So this would be reappropriating some dollars from fiscal year 25 to 26. We're still in 25, so I don't know if they've, it's hard to get a number on that. This isn't a supplemental request or anything like that. Just giving them the reappropriation authority they traditionally have had over the years. So this is no new money. It's money that's been appropriated, right, for fiscal year 25. That was done by the 24 legislature. This is just allowing them to carry it forward to 26.
So it wasn't money that we pulled out of reappropriations for the before the budget, all the money that it was not that. This is money that's in 2025 budget that they're looking for permission to reappropriate it into 2026?
Representative Howe.
That's my understanding, that any unencumbered balance in excess of $100 as of June 30th, 2025 would be reappropriated for fiscal year 26.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd still like to know what the amount is.
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my concerns echo several of the previous speakers here. as I recall, when we were building the budget, there was a significant prop up made by not reappropriating funds. And so that was kind of tantamount to keeping our budget relatively sane. I'd have real reservation about doing this even if I knew the dollar amount. But without a dollar amount, that's a blank check? Oh my, I'm not comfortable with that. So I've got a real problem with this one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Francis.
And just to go on to that, you know, I don't mind the conceptual amendment when it's easy for me to understand, but I really have no idea what we're doing here.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Howe, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify the previous representative, so what we're doing is these are monies that have already been appropriated, approved by the 2024 legislature, and just granting them the reappropriation authority to extend any dollars unspent from 25 to 26. I apologize for not having a fiscal note for you on that, but it was a request. You know, I don't know how it affects the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center specifically in terms of the dollar amount or some of these others. So I apologize for not getting the committee more detailed information on that. But it has been approved. It's not new money, just reappropriation authority. So with that, Mr. Chair, I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? No. The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it. Motion fails. Representative Howe? Any more?
Mr. Chair, I close.
All right. Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My request is for 1.5 to go for disease control here in the state. And part of it is because in 2025, an outbreak of tuberculosis arose in Kansas. I think you've seen it on TV as well as in articles in the paper. The following, TB is spread entirely through the air, disproportionate harms people with compromised immune systems, and inadequate access to health care. KDHE came before us in the social services budget, and they were requesting funding for this. We discussed it, did not fund it at the time because we were trying to keep our budget pretty lean. But since then, over that month, I think there's lots of things that have happened that's very active. There's 67 active TB cases in Kansas, 60 are in Wyandotte County, 7 are in Johnson County. And this makes it the largest TB outbreak on record since the committees on disease control started recording in 1950s. This outbreak, this probably started before January, that's what we have, because it can take up to a year to develop. We also have 79 latent cases that are developing, 76 in Wyandotte and 2 in Johnson County. 2 people have died as a result of tuberculosis. Part of this funding would be available to the health departments around the state, and it would be according to where the outbreaks might be. What they really are talking about, and I've had about 4 people come in to see me about this, is they want to stop it before it develops. And part of it is for those people that are susceptible towards this, and those people really could be people in homeless shelters, prisons, nursing homes, health conditions or medication, and part of it would be free testing for those people that are susceptible to stop it before it spreads further. And they feel that it's throughout the United States, but right now Kansas is the leading for whatever reason. And we were researching it and trying to figure it out. And basically, they say we see larger outbreaks like the one in Kansas. It's often the case that a small number of initial cases were identified and then more were discovered through contact investigations. The underlying public health system is essential to detecting and containing outbreaks at very early stages. And that's what they're asking, is that we put a lid on it and make sure that it doesn't spread further and become a bigger problem than it is. I'll be happy to stand for questions.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion on the amendment. Is there a second? Second by Representative Bueller. Discussion on the motion. Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I have a couple questions. I mean, I understand looking at maybe some counties, $1.5 million and 105 counties, that's about 14,000. I guess who are you speaking on behalf of? Wouldn't the CDC, wouldn't the feds do this? What I guess I'm a little concerned that this is a state-driven, and who's, you know, you answer to whom for the county health to get these dollars? I'm kind of curious of who's leading this bus.
Okay.
Representative Ballard.
Our agency, KDHE, it had put it in their budget, and they came before us to request it. So it came directly from Kansas Health and Environment, and they wanted it. It was actually 2.7 million that they were asking for. And then it was like 1.5. We discussed it in committee, but we didn't fund it.
Representative Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, from the federal, is there a federal match? Is there what, I mean, I'm just a little concerned that the state's role in driving a national situation.
Representative Ballard.
A national situation, but right now the biggest one is in the state of Kansas. We have the problem. The other states have minimal tuberculosis. We have the largest outbreak.
Representative Rogers.
Well, I don't want to go down a trail, but I just was curious of, typically in situations like this, these diseases, it's a federal lead rather than a state trying to do that. I mean, I understand as we're trying to decouple some things, but I have some concern that probably should be a national concern rather than something, you know, if the feds are coming down and saying, KDHE, you must do this, that's again, I'm not an expert in this, I'm just questioning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Bueller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll add a little bit to this. It's not being led by KDHE. This is a partnership with the CDC. If I rewind time 6 weeks when we heard this in committee, there was and is an ongoing response. So this was money to augment the response. One of the primary reasons that we didn't elect to fund it at that time was we were under the belief that it was not going to spread, it was contained, and that existing funds and agencies working together would suffice. So the information which I think Representative Ballard received before me, and I just got 2 nights ago, is it's not responding, I guess, the way we had hoped. It's not as contained as we had hoped, and it was to support and augment that. You know, we didn't just ignore this 6 weeks ago, but we thought it was okay. There's an effort on the ground underway, and it goes back to, I believe, last June.
Last June.
So we were under the impression, hey, this is contained. We don't need to put money at this. There are additional cases that have proven otherwise. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to respond to Representative Rogers, the feds took the money away that was federally. And so that's what this is. There was a federal lapse of $4 million or something like that. This is to pick up the state's portion from that money leaving.
And that is SGF, correct?
It is.
Right. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, Representative Ballard, you may close.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as Chairman Bueller was saying, we didn't not fund it because we didn't like it. We just thought it would just play down. Well, it did. It played out. But when you have 2 deaths And it seems to be concentrated right now in Wyandotte County and some in Johnson County, so you can sort of see where it's going. And if you look at the people we're talking about, the immune systems, the prisons, the shelters, the nursing homes, it could possibly continue. And we're just trying to contain it, and that's what that's why the agency requested it. And so with that, I hope you will vote favorably for this, because we don't want it to be a huge, all over the state. We can contain it because tuberculosis is treatable and preventable. And that's what they're trying to do, prevent it, and those that have it, treat it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You close? All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Representative Williams.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Jill, if you will pass out the amendment. This amendment is related to what we heard yesterday about the Quindaro ruins, the archaeological park, and it would establish a task force. I think there was a great deal of confusion around it. Who owns what are the boundaries, what are the goals, what are the plans? And before we commit $600,000 or any amount of money, I think that we need to understand what all the variables are. So here is the proposal establishing the Quindaro Ruins Archaeological Park Task Force, limiting it to $40,000 for the years 25 and 26, with the hope that they will come back to a recommendation to the legislature in 2026. But the makeup of the board, 9 members, and you can see that in the first paragraph. 1 person appointed from the Speaker of the House as a representative, 1 from the Senate, minority leader from the House and Senate. So you are going to have legislative participation, and I think that's pretty important to get some clarity on this if we're going to do any type of substantial or even partial funding. Second, the Speaker will appoint the chairperson. That will be the point person. And then the purpose is for the collaboration, delineation of roles, responsibilities, timeline, and goals. It also, if you look, the task force shall clarify the boundaries and property ownership, recommend and assist in the preparation of any MOUs for the interested parties, and any development agreements, just kind of bring those together. Number 3, I think this is important, research and record all state and federal opportunities for the area. I think a lot of that has already occurred, but let's accumulate it and examine it, review and provide an accounting of all private grants, gifts, contributions, and bequests, and state, federal, and local funding, and share and review and consolidate any existing plans, and reach an agreement by stakeholders on a plan moving forward. And I think that's what we all want. And then they should provide that information in a report with a recommendation back to the legislature by January 12th, 2026. And I believe that's the substantial part. So I would move my motion.
All right, committee, for the motion, is there a second? Second by Representative Curtis. Discussion on the motion. The only other thing I would say is after having the bill hearing yesterday, I think it was evident that there are a lot of variables going on. We were planning on working the bill, but after the hearing yesterday, I've decided we were not going to work the bill. But this is a way of still moving forward. And so creating this task force to try to get all those different entities on the same page and working together for the completion of the Quindaro archaeological ruins. Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I totally agree. I kind of cringed yesterday when people started talking about creating another task force after 50 years of many task forces on this very subject. But I think that this does indeed put the state in a better position to hopefully move forward what is really a state and national treasure. So I totally agree. I do have one question in the amount of money that we're appropriating. I know this is going to take a lot of work. There's a lot of work that's already been done that can be assembled, but with this appropriation, do we also have the ability to have the resources of the State Historical Society staff?
Representative Williams.
Yes, and it actually says that the above agencies shall provide assistance as may be requested. And Jill can correct me if I am wrong, but anything, they could use their existing funds to extend this.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think this is a good idea. My only, and this might be a question for staff, but is this broad enough to really look at the possibility that the state may have to come in and somehow force all of this under one ownership if that's the way, the only way it can go forward as a state historical designation? Does that need to be an added look, or is that something that is this?
Jill?
Any recommendation they want.
Okay. I just want to make sure it's.
I think it's implied that that would be one of the actions that the task force would have to look at as far as moving forward is all the ownership, who owns the land, what would it look like, how big would it be? I mean, that's what the task force would be challenged with, is looking at all the implications of the project. Representative Estes.
Thank you. I really like this because I shared some of the same concerns, but still want to see this move on. And I wonder if the maker of the amendment would be open to adding a position for the church that former Representative Robinson attended. I'm drawing a blank on their name, but Representative Curtis, I think, can help me remember the name of his church. They don't own any property, but they have played a significant role in preserving certain things, and they were their roots go back to the origins of Quindaro, and I think they're an important voice to be included. Young Chapel, thank you, Representative Barbara, Representative Ballard.
Representative Williams.
Okay, thank you for making that, noticing that. Well, one of the things we were just kind of discussing as you're talking is that there is a community at large that can be appointed by the unified government. And so I think that they could go to the unified government and say, we would like to be part of this. And I think they would be an excellent part of that. I don't know that it would be necessary to specify them. We do have the African Methodist Episcopal Church, but yeah, because they own the land.
Representative Estes.
I'd really like to see them included specifically because there's nothing that obligates the UG to pick them, and they do have extensive historical knowledge that needs to be included.
Representative Williams.
Yes, I think that would be fine. And the language, would you say the language again that you're asking for?
To model after a member appointed by Young Chapel Church.
Okay. Let me clarify that.
Representative Williams.
All right, thank you. So what I would then recommend is that they would take the place of the community at large member, and they would be appointed through the unified government, but it would have to be somebody from the Young Chapel. Is that?
I think that's a very good compromise. Thank you.
Is that all right with the second for the modification? All right. Any further discussion? Representative Ballard.
I support that motion. If you noticed yesterday, I started my questioning in terms of, it sounds like there's a conflict here. And there is a major conflict going on even between the churches and who's in it and whose plan it is and everything else. And this may just clarify it further and have another voice that's coming in from his church versus another church where there was a conflict. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Helgerson.
Well, I heard the same testimony, but I have a very cautionary tale about this. The maker of the motion is trying to solve the problem. But what we're going to do is put the state in the middle of the problem, and the solution then will be the state will have to come up with millions of tens of millions of dollars. In this committee this morning, we talked about eminent domain, which we very rarely ever do, about taking a historical area and saying, we're going to condemn that so that we can take control of it. You know, totally want to recognize the representative. I want to deal with the site, but you're going to put both of our feet in the middle of this problem. And for, I think, was it 50 years, they haven't been able to solve it in the community. And I have some real reservations about us, because when we step in, we're going to be stepping in and we're going to be expected to put in dollars to solve the problem. And I don't know if there's a commitment to spend the amount of money that I heard them starting to request.
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I get clarification on the member of the Young Church? Did we say that the unified government has to appoint somebody there from there?
Representative Williams.
That's correct. You have to have someone that's going to go get that appointment. And so that would be the unified government. They could verify who do you want representing you. But I don't think that we need to have some point person, and having that point person being from an elected position, I think is appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And is that in addition to a representative from the unified government? Okay.
Representative Williams.
Thank you. Clarity. They have one representative from the unified government, and then there was one community member that they were going to appoint. Now the request was from Representative Estes that they appoint, same group, same elected body, appoint from the church that Marvin Robinson attended.
Okay, thank you. So the unified government would still have a representative from their organization. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none.
Mr. Chair, this is John Alcala.
Yes, Representative Alcala.
Thank you. I have to agree with my colleague from Sedgwick County. I think that we're probably inserting ourselves pretty deep into this. I would support any funding for that project. I think it's a good project. But I also think that maybe the housekeeping needs to be done on their end, and then they can come back and look for funding from us. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the work, Representative Williams. I just think that we're really inserting ourselves pretty deep in this. That's my comment. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none. Representative Williams, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're already in the middle of this, and actually we're forcing people to the table. If they haven't accomplished it in 50 years, then they're going to have difficulty moving forward if they can't bring people to the table. We are the unifying entity that can bring those people to the table. If the National Park Service wants to acquire it, then it will not be expenditures for the state of Kansas. But at first, we have to have all the information and a recommendation brought to us, and then we can choose whether or not we want to pursue. So with that, I close on my amendment.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Any further? Okay, are there any further discussions before I make a motion and then a discussion? Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I said I closed, I lied. Yeah, I lied. Thank you. When I made my motion, there was an item in there to strike funding because it's duplicative and it was an error. It was done in error, and it was for $750,000 for the Fort Hays State University Professional Workforce Development. That was already appropriated in last year's budget, and so it got duplicated on accident, I think. And so I would move to strike the Fort Hays State University Professional Workforce Development of $750,000.
All right, committee, for the motion, is there a second? Second by Representative Williams. Discussion on the motion. All right, seeing none, Representative Howe, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to reference, that was from Section 99, and I do close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Now you close. Representative Helgerson.
I had a couple of questions and no motions. Did we close on the Curtis House?
Discussion about that in 2007, I believe.
But there was a question, we had money in appropriations for the house, and there was a discussion also that we may need to put in some additional money for, if it is bought, for upkeep.
It was FTEs for tours.
Well, for tours, but also for rehabbing the facility or bringing it up to the standards. Did we end up closing on the deal?
We have not closed on the house as far as I know.
Okay. Second thing, through some questions, I was told that the ARPA interest of 19.3 that we had discussed in here was going to be used for change orders or items that needed to be done to the building and for office furnishings. Normally, if there is that kind of an appropriation, there is a GBA, which I did not see.
We appropriated that in 2007.
Understanding, but we haven't gotten anything from the governor's office saying how the money is going to be spent. Is that correct?
No, we have, actually, I have received a list from the Department of Administration, and we can have that passed out to committee members on how the money is going to be distributed.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, I have one motion, and then I'm going to make some comments in regards to how this process is going to move forward, and then what we can anticipate to see in the interim months when we adjourn from the legislature. The first motion that I have is because we are not going to be, yes, please, Jill, pass that out. Because we will not be coming back and doing a omnibus budget bill, caseloads will already be coming out after we have adjourned. There's already been some indication that the current Human Services Census caseloads, there may be an addition that may be added, there may not be, but in the anticipation that for fiscal year 2025, if there would be an increase, this would authorize the State Finance Council to go ahead and accept the increases to the Human Services consensus caseload estimates only. No other caseloads, just Human Services. So it's allocating $10 million to the State Finance Council to distribute those funds in regards to the Human Services caseloads. If that money does not need to be appropriated after the caseloads come out after we have adjourned, then the money lapses back to the State General Fund. But this is trying to address some of the items that normally we would address after we have the consensus revenue estimate, after we would have the caseloads. But this is the one where we are identifying that there may be some dollars that need to be expended after the caseloads come out and after we have adjourned. Any other caseloads can be addressed in legislative session of 2026. This is just for the current fiscal year of 2025, because you'll notice it says ending in June 30th of 2025. So that's my motion. Seconded by Representative Francis. Discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, I close on my motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, motion passes. So if there's no further discussion, I just kind of wanted to, since this is a different process, and as I mentioned in the motion that I just currently had, it's going to be looking a little bit different than what we have done in the past. We'll have caseloads after we have adjourned, most likely around April 12th. We're going to have the consensus revenue estimate after we adjourn on April 12th, which is going to, the only other time that we've ever had that in the time that I've been in my tenure as this chairman was during 2020 when we had to pass a budget due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So normally we would also address fiscal notes. The issue is that we're still debating bills in both chambers, and we don't know what the final fiscal note is going to be, nor do we really have an idea of the bills that the governor has signed with a fiscal note. So since we will not be addressing those will be things that we will address in the 2026 legislative session as a supplemental. So we'll be looking at that next legislative session. Doesn't mean that they can't be funded by existing funds within the agencies and departments if they so wish to move forward with it. It's just now with the calendar the way it is, we just don't have the ample information to try to address fiscal notes in regards to all the bills that have passed both chambers, not necessarily just one chamber, but this would have been a discussion that we'd have if we had it funded by or passed by both chambers and signed by the governor. So because we're early in the process, we really can't have that discussion. So I just wanted to make that comment known. The other is, because this is a new process, we'll be continuing this on next year. We'll be starting the process most likely earlier, probably around in the month of September, and then trying to have everything finalized within the first week of December, with the anticipation I still have to clear this with the Speaker of the House, but with the anticipation that in the first week of January of 2026, our budget committees will meet and then start having deliberations in regards to the budget that was passed out by the special committee on the legislative budget. I just kind of wanted to just give an outlay of how things may look like and give you a paradigm of how things might move forward for next session, because we learned a lot this particular session. I think we did a extremely good job in moving forward with the calendar and the new process. But obviously, with any new process, there are learning experiences, and we'll be taking those into the next session. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that clarification. One thing I would say, and I would ask the chairman to comment on this, in the bills that we pass, there are oftentimes fiscal notes that are highly inflated that we don't agree with, FTEs that we do not agree with. Yes, they can use existing funds and hire a couple people to fill those spots, but I would just think that all agencies should be extremely cautious in adding FTEs, spending existing funds, and then expecting us to bail them out if, in fact, that was not how we wanted that bill to be enacted. And so I just wanted you to comment on that.
Well, I mean, that's a good point, but also we're kind of in new territory because we're not going to be able to address those fiscal notes. Normally we would say, no, I think this is inflated. We would also be able to have the Department of Administration go and the Division of Budget go to the agencies and departments and say, okay, this passed. Is this the fiscal note that you really need? Or we would be able to make the decision when we would have the omnibus discussion on, well, I think you really could do this with existing funds, so we're not going to fund the fiscal note. As I mentioned before, we would be able to address that in a supplemental note in the 2026 legislative session. Also, at that time, when we start with the special committee on legislative budget, we could have discussions on the fiscal notes as well, because we'll have that information. Plus, we'll also have the Legislative Budget Committee, which I would probably garner that would have a different perspective in regards to items that they would discuss, and would basically focus on that item in the first meeting when we would meet in August. Because we would have an idea of what was passed by both chambers, signed by the governor, what the fiscal impact would be, and we would be able to have a discussion with the Director of Budget in regards to the fiscal notes and our research department.
Then.
Representative Ballard.
Then a clarification, because a question we've been asked, would we be likely to have a special session because we couldn't do anything with the budget if we have to make a change, but you say coming back in August?
Well, I can't say anything about a special session. No, what the anticipation is that we would start in late September with where we started last year around December in the 5 meetings that we had on the special legislative budget committee. That would be starting in a couple months prior.
Okay.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Representative Williams? No motion.
Oh, I didn't hear.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would close on my motion for 125 as amended.
All right. Is there a second? Second by Representative Williams. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion passes. All right. Thank you, committee. We got that done. And so tomorrow we are actually scheduled to work House Bill 2237 and House Bill 2402, and then we're also going to have a briefing on what Senate Ways and Means has done with our bill and substitute to House Bill 2007. So until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we are adjourned.